In this short video, we will give you an overview of how Stanford Student Enterprises Capital Group supports your student group finances, as well as explain what we expect of you as a financial officer. The Capital Group functions as the bank for all student groups. We facilitate all banking transactions such as check requests and deposits, as well as provide customer service support to financial officers and student group members. First, we will go over your various responsibilities as financial officer. Second, we will share detailed information about the different banking requests. Third, we will explain and provide examples of the proper documentation required for all requests. Finally, we will give you some general tips on submitting requests on MyGroups. Let's review your responsibilities. As a financial officer, you will keep track of all your group's accounts and funding. Each group has a unique 4-digit voluntary student organization number. Each club can have two types of accounts: the general 2800 account and various funded accounts. The 2800 account is your money. It is funded by group dues, ticket sales, etc. For this reason, it is generally unrestricted and can be spent on whatever your group sees fit. In addition, groups can have funded accounts that are comprised of money from various Stanford sources. These accounts are restricted, and they have to be used for purchases that were specifically outlined in your funding application. In addition, money in your funded accounts will be cleared at the end of each quarter, unlike the 2800 balance, which will roll over to the next academic year. Keep all itemized documentation, whether it be a receipt, quote, or other. The more documentation you have, the easier it will be to be reimbursed. Make sure you let your group members know what kind of documentation they need after making any purchases. Encourage them to keep all physical documents and take pictures of receipts so they can email receipts to you for easy upload. A photo of the receipt is also a good backup in case the paper receipt is lost. After obtaining the proper funding for your group and gathering the necessary documentation from group members who made purchases with that funding, you'll then submit the relevant banking request via the MyGroups website. You are responsible for submitting all group expenses and transactions, as well as verifying that they are within the GSB funding regulations and guidelines. Let's explain the different kinds of banking requests you may submit. A reimbursement request is used to reimburse an individual in the group for a group-related purpose. For example, reimbursing someone for their purchase of chips and dip from Safeway for a group meeting. A self-reimbursement request is essentially the same, only you, the financial officer, bought the chips from Safeway, so you'll submit the request to reimburse yourself. You'll need an itemized receipt with adequate proof of payment for a reimbursement request. Authorization is also required for this request. Primary authorization comes from you and is a simple checkbox verifying that the purchase on the requests are an appropriate use of your group's funds. Secondary authorization comes from your group's president, but is only required for reimbursement requests over $1,000 and for all self-reimbursements. An invoice payment is used to directly pay a company that provided a service or good for your group. For example, for t-shirts, you will attach an itemized invoice. If everything is in order, Capital Group will write a check directly to the vendor. Primary authorization is always needed, and secondary authorization is needed only if the request total is over $1,000. An honorarium payment pays an individual who performed a service for your group. For example, hiring a DJ for a party. In this case, Capital Group would write a check directly to the DJ. To process this request, an online honorarium form must be completed by the payee. This form collects tax information for tax reporting purposes and will be sent to the payee by email when the request is submitted. An advance payment request is for accessing group funds up front to pay for larger upcoming purchases that no one in your group may want to put on their personal credit card. This request is a little different from the ones we talked about previously because there is no documentation required up front. You will submit the request explaining you need the funds and how much you estimate the cost to be, and a check will be written to someone in your group as long as the group has the funds. Within 2 weeks of us giving you the check, we will need the documentation showing you used the check for what you claimed. If we don't receive documentation within 2 weeks, we will put a hold on your account. For example, if your group needs $10,000 worth of plane tickets for a conference in New York, you will submit an advance payment request, and we will write a check to you for $10,000. Within 2 weeks, you must provide documentation. If the tickets cost $9,000, You will also need to deposit the remaining $1,000 back into your account to lift the hold. Group transfer is the most common type of transfer request and is used to transfer funds between two student groups. For example, co-sponsoring an event with another group who contributes $1,000. The only documentation we require for this request is either a flyer of the event with both of your group logos or a confirmation email chain between financial officers specifying the agreed-upon amount to be transferred. When submitting this request, you will also need the recipient group's appropriate account to transfer to. Deposits must be made in person and can be made by anyone in your group. A deposit request will first need to be created on MyGroups, specifying the amount to be deposited. A banking associate will count everything and make sure the checks are endorsed with your 4-digit group number. The funds will then show up in your account. The general process for withdrawing money from your group's accounts is as follows. You will first create and submit the appropriate banking request on MyGroups. It will either be approved and the payee will be emailed that their check is ready, or it will be rejected. If it is rejected, you will receive an email. After going to the request on MyGroups, you will see a note from a banking manager on the bottom left-hand corner of the request explaining why it was rejected. You can then edit the request and resubmit. The biggest reason requests get rejected is for insufficient documentation. We need two things for documentation of all purchases: itemization and proof of payment. Most, but not all receipts, have these two things, so you and your group members should confirm when you are looking at a receipt. Multiple documents can be uploaded to a line item on MyGroups, so if you have one receipt that shows itemization and another receipt that shows proof of payment, both receipts can be uploaded for that transaction. If only the receipt showing itemization is uploaded or vice versa, the request will be rejected. If you have an itemized receipt for a purchase, but nowhere on it does it say your card was charged or the balance due is zero, a bank statement can serve as proof of payment. On the bank statement, we'll need the name of the cardholder, the name of the bank, and the relevant transaction listed as posted, not pending. All other information can be blacked out. Online orders are a little bit different in that they can be canceled. For this reason, order confirmations are not sufficient because we want to see that orders have been completed. For proof of payment, the specific language we need to see is billed to card, charged to card, or a shipping confirmation showing the items were shipped on a previous date. If you do not receive any documentation showing your card was charged or the items shipped, you will need to provide your bank statement. Add the payee's email address in the request so they are notified when the check has been mailed or when it is ready to pick up. If you have multiple receipts for a group member who made various purchases, put them all into one request for that individual. If you submit more than one request for the same person in one day, they will be rejected. In addition to being able to upload more than one document for each line item, multiple line items can be added to the same request. This means if someone made purchases at Safeway, Home Depot, and Walmart, each of these transactions can be included on the same request in 3 separate line items. Separate each receipt and transaction into its own line item, even if it's from the same vendor. If someone has 3 Safeway receipts from 3 separate transactions, each transaction, regardless of the vendor, needs its own line. Payments made through payment sharing apps like Venmo or PayPal will not be reimbursed. You can check on the status of all your requests on MyGroups. Make sure each request you've submitted has documentation uploaded, as well as the necessary authorizations. If the document status says waiting, you likely forgot to upload documentation. You'll need to contact us to reject it so you can edit the request. Here's our contact information. Please let us know if you have any questions. Thanks for watching.